What if you're not as in control as you think? What if your goals, your relationships, even your sense of identity aren't the products of logic or choice, but the echoes of something older, deeper, and far more primal? Not hunger, not fear, but sex. Not in the way tabloids or movies talk about it, not the physical act, but something beneath it, a force that silently guides your desires, fuels your ambition, poisons your regrets, and seduces your dreams. Carl Jung didn't see sex as a simple drive. He saw it as the core energy of life itself. He called it the libido, not a dirty word, but the raw psychic energy behind creation, power, love, war, guilt, art, even God. He believed that everything we chase in life is just sex in disguise, not always consciously, in fact rarely consciously, because society taught us to hide it, to repress it, to call it sinful, shameful, dangerous, but repression doesn't make it disappear. It buries it. It turns it into something darker, something that controls you from the shadows. Why do you crave admiration? Why do you sabotage your own happiness? Why do you fall in love with people who destroy you? What if all these questions trace back to a single hidden root? Not love, not logic, not destiny, but a distorted unconscious echo of your unspoken sexual self. This isn't a conspiracy. It's not moral panic, it's psychology. And once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. Sex isn't just about pleasure. It's about power. It's about identity. It's about everything. So the real question is not, do you desire? The real question is, does your desire control you? Because if you're not aware of the force driving your life, you might not be living your life at all. Most people hear the word libido and immediately think of sex. But Carl Jung redefined it. He didn't reduce it to mere lust or pleasure. For Jung, libido was life energy, pure raw psychic force. It could fuel desire, yes, but also ambition, creativity, rage, obsession, even your longing for meaning. To Jung, the libido was like a river, sometimes smooth, sometimes violent, but always flowing beneath the surface of your mind. And whether you're aware of it or not, it shapes everything. In childhood, it drives curiosity. In adolescence, it becomes attraction. In adulthood, it takes new forms: career, marriage, status, power. Even the monk who renounces sex is being driven by it, just in reverse. His suppression is also a form of obsession, a transformation of libido into spiritual pursuit. That's what made Jung dangerous to the establishment. He wasn't just talking about sex. He was saying that the most sacred parts of human life, morality, religion, love, are all dripping with sublimated libido. And society doesn't like that. Because if libido is behind everything, then what happens to our idea of free will? What happens to our heroes, our saints, our lovers? Are they just vessels for a hidden force they never understood? Here's the twist. Jung didn't believe libido was bad. He believed repressing it was. He saw what happened when people tried to live sanitized lives, pretending they were above their instincts. It didn't lead to peace. It led to anxiety, nightmares, neurosis. It created people who looked calm on the outside, but were boiling, broken, and confused on the inside. This was the shadow of libido, the silent poison of the unconscious. When you deny your desire, it doesn't go away. It mutates. That's why the nice guy turns passive-aggressive. That's why the workaholic can't stop even after success. That's why relationships crumble for reasons no one can explain. Repressed libido doesn't vanish. It disguises itself. It hides in ambition. It disguises itself as self-sacrifice. It wears the mask of religion, productivity, even love. But it's not love, it's possession. It's obsession. It's an unconscious attempt to regain a sense of power we don't even know we lost. Jung warned, until you become conscious of these forces, they will rule your life, and you will call it fate. So here's the unsettling truth. Your career might not be about purpose. It might be a sublimated sex drive. Your love life might not be about connection. It might be about control and your idea of yourself. It might be a carefully constructed cage, built to keep the libido locked inside. But cages don't last forever, and when the libido breaks free, it doesn't knock. It explodes. That's when midlife crises happen. That's when scandals erupt. That's when you look in the mirror and don't recognize the face staring back, because libido never dies. It waits, and the more you repress it, the more violently it returns. So Jung wasn't asking us to surrender to our desire. He was asking us to face it, to understand it, to integrate it, to turn it from a shadowy master into a conscious ally. Because when you learn to ride the river, you stop drowning in it. What happens when a force as powerful as libido threatens to disrupt the social order? You don't destroy it. You contain it. You moralize it. From ancient temples to modern schools, every civilization has tried to tame sexuality, not because it's evil, but because it's dangerous. Not dangerous to the soul. Dangerous to control, because desire makes people unpredictable. It makes them disobedient. It makes them hungry, not just for flesh, but for truth, for rebellion, for something more. So society did what it always does to dangerous truths. It covered them in shame. Religions called it sin. Governments called it immoral. Families called it improper. And schools ignored it entirely. But silence is not safety. It's strategy. When you suppress someone's most primal force, you don't eliminate it. You fracture them. Now they can be managed, told who to love, what to fear, how to live. Sexual repression wasn't about virtue. It was about control. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He believed that the repression of sexuality wasn't accidental. It was engineered. Because once you repress libido, it doesn't vanish. It turns inward. It creates guilt. It creates confusion. It creates people who are easy to manipulate because they no longer trust their own desires. This is how the libido was weaponized. Turn it against itself. Make it dirty. Make it dangerous. Make people ashamed of what they are, and when they're ashamed, they'll obey. Think about it. The same society that sells sex to sell everything, cars, phones, clothes, is the one that tells you not to talk about it, not to think about it, not to want it too much. Why? Because desire is profitable when it's unconscious, but threatening when it's awakened. An unconscious libido buys things. An awakened libido asks questions. Questions like, why do I feel empty even when I have everything? Why do I crave validation from strangers? Why does success still feel like failure? These are not surface-level questions. They come from a deeper fracture, a self divided between what it wants and what it's told to want. Jung believed this fracture is the root of modern neurosis. People feel lost not because they lack direction, but because they've been taught to fear the compass inside them. Sexual repression creates psychological imbalance. But worse, it creates spiritual decay. Because if libido is the energy of life itself, then to fear it is to fear life. To repress it is to numb the soul. So we overcorrect. We swing from denial to indulgence, from shame to obsession, from moral purity to hypersexualization. But both extremes are symptoms. Neither is integration. The porn industry and the priesthood are not opposites. They are mirrors, both feeding on a society that never taught people how to relate to their own desire, because no one ever taught them what Jung was trying to say, that libido isn't the enemy. It's the fuel. You can use it to build, to create, to love, or you can bury it and live your life as someone else's idea of who you should be. A consumer, a follower, a broken self, pretending to be whole. So the next time you feel guilt about wanting more, ask yourself where that guilt came from. Was it really yours, or was it given to you by a world that profits off your confusion? What if the person you're searching for is already inside you? Carl Jung believed that every man carries an unconscious image of a woman within him, and every woman an unconscious image of a man. He called them the anima and animus, The inner opposites, the soul's hidden lover. Not real people, but powerful psychic forces. They're not just romantic fantasies. They shape how you see the world, how you love, what you chase, and what destroys you. A man's anima is emotional, intuitive, seductive. A woman's animus is rational, forceful, dominant. These inner figures evolve. At first, they're projections, reflected in celebrities, crushes, obsessions. But over time, they become gateways to self-integration if you're willing to face them. Here's where libido enters the story again. When you meet someone and feel that magnetic, irrational pull, it's often not them you're drawn to. It's your anima or animus, awakened by their presence. You think it's love, but it's projection. You've cast your inner self onto someone else, and that's why it feels so intense, so spiritual, so fated. But it also explains why it so often collapses, because no one can live up to the mythology you've projected onto them. Jung warned, if you don't make these inner figures conscious, they will rule your relationships like invisible puppeteers. You'll chase the same kind of person over and over. The emotional mystery, the stoic protector, the unattainable ideal. And when they disappoint you, you won't understand why, because it's not really about them. It's about you, searching for the parts of yourself you've never accepted. The anima is not just a fantasy woman. She is your sensitivity, your creativity, your vulnerability. The animus is not just a fantasy man. He is your logic, your confidence, your assertiveness. If you deny them, they take revenge. You become emotionally stunted. You sabotage intimacy. You fall in love with illusions, not people, or worse. You become possessed by your inner opposite. The man becomes irrational, moody, self-destructive. The woman becomes cold, bitter, overly critical. These aren't gender roles. They're psychological imbalances, signs that the libido has turned inward, twisted by repression and fantasy. But if you face these figures, really face them, something changes. The man becomes more whole. He no longer fears his softness. He becomes stronger because he's no longer pretending. The woman becomes more grounded. She no longer fears her voice. She becomes freer because she's no longer hiding. And relationships? They stop being about possession. They become mirrors. Two people meeting as they are, not as projections of inner wounds. This is the power of integration. Jung didn't want people to eliminate desire. He wanted them to understand it, to realize that every longing is a message from within. You don't need to chase love to complete you. You need to find the part of yourself that you've been projecting onto others, because once you do, you stop falling for illusions. You stop being controlled by hidden fantasies. You stop needing someone else to make you feel whole. And that's when real love becomes possible, not a fairy tale, not a possession, but a conscious union of two people, each having met their own soul first. Sex is rarely just about sex. It's about power. And the closer you look, the more disturbing the game becomes. In every flirtation, every crush, every obsession, there's a silent negotiation happening beneath the surface. Who is in control? Who is chasing? Who is wanted? And who is more wanted? Carl Jung saw libido not just as sexual energy, but as psychic energy, the force behind all ambition, desire, creation, and domination, which means sexual attraction isn't always romantic. Sometimes it's strategic, sometimes it's a battlefield, and power, real power, isn't loud. It seduces, it charms, it doesn't need to beg, it makes you come willingly. That's why so many people confuse desire with submission. They think they're falling in love, but they're really falling into a power dynamic. One person idealizes, the other controls. One person needs validation, the other dispenses it in doses. This isn't love. This is psychological seduction. And in our culture, where sex is everywhere but intimacy is rare, the game thrives. Social media amplifies it. People showcase their bodies like products. Likes become currency, and attention becomes control. Who gets to be seen? Who gets to be desired? Who decides what's beautiful, valuable, wanted? The answer reveals who holds the power, and most don't even realize they're playing the game. But Jung would say, if you don't become conscious of the dynamic, you'll be used by it. You'll mistake control for affection, obsession for passion. You'll crave those who hurt you, because deep down it feels familiar. It feels like home. Why? Because unresolved power struggles in your psyche mirror the ones in your relationships. If you were made to feel small, you'll chase those who make you feel smaller, hoping one day they'll finally choose you. If you were never truly seen, you'll chase visibility through beauty, sex, achievement, but it will never be enough, because it's not about the people you're seducing. It's about the power you think they'll give you, and until you reclaim your own, you'll stay trapped. Sex becomes manipulation, love becomes dependency, power becomes a mask for deep insecurity. But when you become aware of the game, you can stop playing. You realize you don't need to seduce to be valued. You don't need to dominate or submit to be loved. You need to own your libido, not suppress it, not weaponize it. Own it, channel it. Because when sex and power are unconscious, they destroy, but when they're integrated, they can transform not into control, but into confidence, not into obsession, but into presence. And that's what real attraction is, not manipulation, but magnetism. The kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't play games. It simply is. Not all desire is physical. Some of it disguises itself as art, as religion, as love for beauty, truth, or the divine. But even then, the same force is behind it. Jung called it libido. Not just sexual energy, but the total energy of your psyche seeking form, meaning, and transformation. And when this energy can't find a healthy outlet, it mutates into obsession, into worship, into madness, dressed as inspiration. Think about the artist who can't sleep until the painting is done, the poet who bleeds their soul onto paper, the mystic who renounces the world to find God. All of them, possessed by something greater than logic, something burning beneath the surface. That's the libido, hijacked by the unconscious, driven to create or be consumed. This is where sex and spirit become almost indistinguishable. You crave someone not just for their body, but because they awaken something buried inside you. A hunger for completion, a longing for transcendence, a desire to dissolve into something eternal. This is why lovers say things like, "You complete me," or "We're soulmates." It's not just romance, it's metaphysical hunger. But Jung would warn, be careful. Because if you don't know what part of you is longing, you might sacrifice everything chasing a ghost. The same libido that creates art can also create delusion. A person becomes your muse, but they're really a mirror, reflecting a missing piece of yourself, and when they leave, you don't just lose them. You lose the meaning you projected onto them. That's why obsession hurts so much, because you weren't just in love with them. You were in love with what they symbolized, and when that symbol breaks, your entire identity shatters with it. But here's the twist. That intensity, that hunger can be reclaimed. You don't have to destroy yourself to feel deeply. You don't have to chase someone or something outside of you to awaken your soul. You can channel that same energy into purpose, into creativity, into becoming who you were meant to be, because libido isn't the enemy, it's the compass. It shows you where you're fragmented and where you need to heal. This is why Jung believed that libido, when understood, becomes sacred. It's not about repression, it's not about indulgence, it's about redirection. When your longing becomes conscious, it becomes creation. When your obsession becomes insight, it becomes transformation. And when your spiritual hunger is no longer projected outward, it becomes power, quiet, radiant, undeniable. That's not art as escape, that's art as alchemy. Not love as addiction, but love as awakening. Not spirituality as fantasy, but spirituality as integration. You don't need to chase meaning through others. You are the meaning, waiting to be remembered. We live in an age where sex is everywhere, and yet no one seems satisfied. We swipe, scroll, consume, and chase, but somehow we feel more disconnected than ever. This is the paradox of the modern mind, hypersexual on the surface, emotionally numb underneath. Carl Jung never lived to see TikTok, Instagram, or OnlyFans, but he saw the pattern coming. When a culture suppresses the deeper meaning of libido, it doesn't disappear. It splits. Part of it erupts into overstimulation. The other part collapses into emptiness. One person becomes addicted to chasing pleasure. Another loses all interest in intimacy. We've mistaken visibility for connection, performance for passion, pleasure for meaning. Sex has become a commodity. Bodies, content, desire, algorithm. But what happens when you turn something sacred into something disposable? You don't just devalue sex, you fracture the psyche. That's why so many people feel trapped between extremes. Either they can't stop consuming, or they can't feel anything at all. Hypersexuality isn't just about lust. It's often about escape. It's the psyche trying to feel alive when everything else feels numb. On the other side, numbness is a defense, a shutdown. It's the body saying, "I've felt too much, now I feel nothing." Both are symptoms of a deeper hunger left unmet, because libido, true libido, wants more than dopamine hits. It wants connection, meaning, psychic integration. When we ignore that, we become easy to manipulate. Corporations profit from our cravings. Social media feeds on our loneliness, and we keep chasing the next fix, never realizing we're being drained. Jung believed that this imbalance signals a collective neurosis, a sickness of the soul. When sex loses its symbolic depth, it becomes mechanical. When intimacy is replaced with content, we become consumers of each other, and when we numb ourselves to our own desire, we lose access to one of the most powerful forces of transformation. But there's a way out, not through repression, not through indulgence, but through awareness. What are you really craving when you open that app late at night? What part of you feels hollow, no matter how many matches, likes, or partners? This is where the real work begins, because libido isn't just about sex, it's your life force. It's the fuel for your passion, your purpose, your power. You don't need to escape it, you need to understand it, to feel again. Not just with your body, but with your soul. That means slowing down, being present, asking what you truly want, beneath the noise, beneath the screen. Because when you stop numbing yourself, you start noticing again. Noticing the ache in your chest, the fire in your belly, the hunger to be seen, held, and understood. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of integration. In a world trying to seduce and sedate you, the most radical act is to feel deeply, consciously, fully. That's where liberation begins. The real journey isn't about rejecting sex, nor obsessing over it. It's about understanding what it represents. It's about integration. Carl Jung didn't teach people to repress desire. He taught them to meet it, face to face, to trace it back to its origin, to see what part of the self was hiding beneath the hunger, because every craving is a clue, every obsession is a map, and the people we chase, or run from, are mirrors, not masters. When you desire someone intensely, ask, what do they represent to me? Is it freedom, confidence, tenderness, or the part of myself I've disowned? And when you feel shame or fear or resistance, ask, whose voice is that in my head? Is it mine or someone else's story? Integration means becoming whole. It means pulling back the projections. It means reclaiming your own energy from the people, fantasies, and fears you've scattered it into. It's not a moral process. It's a psychological one. To integrate is to admit, yes, I have desire, yes, I have fear, yes, I long for love, control, power, transcendence, and none of that makes me broken. It makes me human. The fragmented self becomes whole, not by cutting out parts, but by welcoming them back. Your anima, your animus, your shadow, your wounds, they all have something to say, if you can listen without judgment. In a world that either glorifies desire or shames it, integration is rebellion. It's a refusal to be split, to be used, to be numb. Instead, you become rooted, aligned. You understand that sex isn't just physical, it's psychological, spiritual, symbolic, and once you see that, you're no longer a slave to your urges. You're the one directing them. You stop chasing people to complete you. You realize you were never missing anything. You stop fearing your own depth. You realize your darkness holds your light. This is the gift of Jung's work. Not purity, not perfection, but wholeness. And in that wholeness you find peace. Not because you've silenced the storm, but because you've become the eye of it. Not because you've tamed your desire, but because you've learned to walk with it without being consumed. This is the beginning of true power, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that masters the self. And that's the quiet revolution of becoming whole. You thought you were making choices, falling in love, giving in to passion, swiping out, of boredom, staying late at night with someone who barely knows your name. But what if none of it was truly you? What if every decision you thought you were making was being made for you? By a force you never questioned, your unconscious desire, your hidden fears, your unhealed wounds. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The truth is, you were never in control, not of who you wanted, not of what you chased, not even of what broke you, because control doesn't come from willpower. It comes from awareness. You can't master what you refuse to confront. You can't escape what you secretly serve. Sex, love, power. These aren't the enemy, but your blindness to their meaning might be. The question isn't whether desire controls your life. It's whether you're willing to see how. Because only then can you finally take it back, not by force, but by integration. When you face what was hidden, you stop being a puppet. You start becoming a person. And maybe, for the first time, you realize you were never lost, only fragmented. And now, you begin to return. If this made you feel something real, if it stirred a truth you couldn't name, don't let it go. Subscribe. Share it with someone who's still living in the illusion, and leave a comment. What's the one desire you've never dared to question? Let's keep digging, because the real war isn't out there. It's in here, and it's just begun.